The Galactic Council station hung in space like a jewel. It orbited Axiom Prime, a neutral world where 1,000 different species had built their monument to unity. Ships from across the galaxy docked at its ports every day, bringing delegates from civilizations that had mastered the stars long before Earth had even invented the wheel. Today, everyone was waiting for humanity. The docking bay was crowded with officials, officers, and curious onlookers. News had spread quickly about the humans. They were the species that had somehow survived the Void Incursion, a devastating attack that had destroyed 3 entire sectors of space. Fleets had fallen. Colonies had burned. Yet somehow, these newcomers from a small blue world had endured. Commander War stood at the front of the welcoming party. He was Krethian, a species known for their military might. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in thick scales that could deflect plasma fire. 4 arms crossed over his massive chest as he waited. Around him, other officers whispered among themselves. "I heard their world was primitive just 2 centuries ago," one said. "They must have found ancient technology," another replied. "No species develops that quickly on their own. Perhaps they have powerful weapons. Or maybe their warriors are genetically enhanced beyond what our scanners can detect." Vor said nothing, but he was curious. Any species that could survive what had destroyed so many others must have something remarkable to show. The human shuttle appeared on the screens. It was small, almost laughably so compared to the grand vessels that usually brought new delegates. It had no visible weapons, no shields that registered on their sensors. It looked like something a merchant might use for short trips. Between stations, the shuttle docked with a soft hiss. The bay doors opened. Vor leaned forward slightly, expecting to see battle-scarred warriors in advanced armor. Or perhaps a delegation of brilliant scientists surrounded by floating technology. Or even cybernetically enhanced diplomats with obvious modifications that screamed of their species' achievements. Instead, a single man stepped out. He was unremarkable. Average height for a human, maybe 170 centimeters. He wore a simple gray suit that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced fabrics most species used. His black hair was neatly combed, and he had a calm expression on his face. He appeared to be middle-aged, with slight lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. Behind him came one other person. A young woman, perhaps in her 20s, wearing equally simple clothing. She carried what looked like a basic data tablet, the kind even the poorest colonies had abandoned decades ago. That was it. 2 humans. The bay fell silent. "This is Earth's envoy?" Vor muttered to the officer beside him. His voice dripped with disbelief and barely concealed mockery. The other delegates began whispering. Some laughed quietly. Others looked insulted. Was this a joke? Had Earth sent its weakest members as some kind of test? Or did they simply not understand the importance of this moment? The man walked forward with steady, unhurried steps. When he reached the welcoming party, he stopped and bowed politely. It was a gesture of respect, performed with careful precision. "Greetings," he said in perfectly clear Galactic Common, the universal language used across the stars. "My name is Dekang. I am here to represent the people of Earth before the Galactic Council. This is Hanali, my associate." The young woman bowed as well. High Chancellor Dex stepped forward. She was Intari, a species of tall, elegant beings who had led the council for over 1,000 years. Her expression was cold and controlled, but those who knew her could see the disappointment in her crystalline eyes. "Representative Kang," she said formally, though her tone suggested she was already dismissing him in her mind. "Earth's request to join the Galactic Council is acknowledged. However, you must understand that membership is not given lightly. Every species must prove they are worthy of standing among us." Day nodded. "I understand completely, Chancellor. Earth is honored to have this opportunity. Honored, someone muttered from the crowd. They should be terrified. Vex continued as if she hadn't heard. You will face 3 trials. The trial of strength, to prove your species can defend itself and its allies. The trial of wisdom, to prove you can think beyond simple survival. And the trial of will, to prove you have the mental fortitude required of council members. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Most species spend years preparing for these trials. Some spend decades. They send their greatest warriors, their most brilliant minds, their strongest champions. Her gaze swept over Day and Hana, making her point clear. You have 3 days to prepare. The trials begin immediately after. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 3 days was almost insulting. It was barely enough time to understand the requirements, let alone prepare properly. They simply smiled. 3 days is generous, Chancellor. We are ready to begin whenever you wish. Vor snorted. The human's confidence was either admirable or foolish. Probably foolish. Very well, Vex said. Your quarters have been prepared. The first trial will commence in 72 standard hours. I suggest you use that time wisely. She turned and walked away, her robes flowing behind her. The other officials began to disperse, talking among themselves. Vor could hear their conversations. Did you see? No weapons, no armor, nothing. Earth must not value this opportunity. Why else send such ordinary representatives? I almost feel bad for them. They have no idea what they're facing. Vor watched as Day and Hana were led away by a junior attendant toward their quarters. The human man walked with his head up, that same calm expression on his face. Either he genuinely didn't understand the danger he was in, or he knew something the rest of them didn't dot as the crowd thinned. One of Vor's fellow officers approached him. Commander, what do you think? Vor crossed all 4 of his arms. I think Earth has made a terrible mistake. They'll fail the first trial, and we'll never hear from them again. Should we even bother watching? Oh, I'll watch, Vor said, a cruel smile crossing his face. Someone should witness their humiliation. Perhaps it will teach them some humility. But as he walked away, a small part of him wondered. The humans had survived the Void incursion. Ships had fallen, colonies had burned, and somehow they had endured. That had to mean something. Still, looking at the unremarkable man in the gray suit, Vor couldn't imagine what that something could be. The station's lights dimmed as the day cycle ended. In their simple quarters, they sat at a small table while Hana reviewed information on her tablet. They're all laughing at us, Hana said quietly. I know, they replied. Does that bother you? They smiled. Not at all. Let them laugh now. By the time we're finished, they'll understand. Understand what? That humanity's greatest strength was never going to be something they could see on a scanner or measure with their instruments. He stood and looked out the window at the stars beyond. We're about to teach them what it really means to be human. Outside, the Galactic Council Station continued its eternal orbit, unaware that everything was about to change. The trials would begin soon, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. The arena was packed. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different species filled the massive circular stadium. Some had traveled from distant systems just to watch Earth's trial. The betting pools had been running for 2 days, and the odds were heavily against humanity. No one gave them any real chance of success. Commander Vor sat in the officers' section, his massive frame taking up 2 regular seats. Around him, other military leaders from across the galaxy talked and laughed. The mood was festive, almost celebratory. They were here to watch a spectacle, not a real competition. Did you hear who they're sending? One officer asked. Some nobody, probably, another replied. Earth doesn't have champions like we do. They're too young as a species. The arena floor was made of reinforced metal that could withstand plasma fire and kinetic strikes. Weapons racks lined the walls, filled with everything from simple blades to advanced energy rifles. Defensive shields and armor hung on display, available for the champions to choose from. On one side of the arena stood Grax the Unbroken. He was a legend, a Vorheim gladiator who had never been defeated in 300 matches. His species was already large and powerful, but Grax was exceptional even among his own kind. He stood over 3 meters tall, his body covered in biometallic scales that were harder than most armor. His forearms ended in plasma claws that could cut through reinforced steel. His eyes glowed red with combat stimulants. Grax raised his arms and roared. The crowd roared back, cheering for their champion. High Chancellor Dex stood in the center of the arena, her voice amplified across the stadium. The trial of strength will now commence. Earth must provide a champion to face Grax the Unbroken in single combat. The match continues until one fighter yields or cannot continue. A door opened on the opposite side of the arena. Dakan walked out, and beside him came Earth's champion. The crowd's cheering stopped abruptly, replaced by confused murmuring. The human was small. Compared to Grax, he looked like a child. He stood maybe 175 centimeters tall, with a lean, wiry build. He wore simple, flexible clothing, similar to what athletes might wear. No armor, no weapons, no visible enhancements. His name was Young Park, and he looked completely unremarkable. That's their champion? Someone in the crowd yelled. Laughter rippled through the stadium. Voara leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This had to be a trick. Maybe the human was hiding something. Maybe he had nanomachine enhancements invisible to their scanners. Maybe he carried a concealed weapon, but his sensors showed nothing. Young Park was exactly what he appeared to be, an ordinary human male with no special equipment. Grax looked down at his opponent and laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed across the arena. Is this a joke? Did Earth send you here to die? Young simply bowed respectfully, saying nothing. Dex raised her hand. Champions, take your positions. Young walked to the center of the arena with calm, measured steps. He didn't go to the weapon racks. He didn't choose armor. He simply stood there, waiting. The crowd grew silent, sensing something was about to happen. Begin. Dex's voice rang out. Grax charged immediately. His massive form moved with surprising speed. Plasma claws extended, ready to end the match in seconds. The crowd held its breath. Young wasn't there. The human had moved so quickly that even the high-speed cameras had trouble tracking him. One moment he was standing in front of Grax. The next, he was 3 meters to the left. Grax's plasma claws sliced through empty air. Grax spun and charged again. Young sidestepped, his movements fluid and precise. The alien warrior's claws came within centimeters of the human's body, but never quite touched him. Again and again, Grax attacked. Each time, Young evaded. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He simply moved, always staying just beyond reach. Stand still and fight. Grax roared in frustration, but Young said nothing. His face remained calm, almost peaceful. His eyes tracked every movement Grax made, watching, learning, adapting. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Grax was breathing heavily now, his attacks becoming slightly less precise. Young hadn't thrown a single strike. He had only dodged, studied, and waited. What is he doing? An officer near Vor asked. I don't know, Vor admitted. He had never seen anything like this. Hannah Lee sat in the Earth delegation section, watching calmly. An alien diplomat beside her couldn't contain his curiosity. Why doesn't your champion fight back? He is fighting, Hannah replied simply. He's fighting the way humans learn to fight. By running? By understanding. Grax charged again, this time putting all his strength into a devastating overhead strike. His plasma claws came down like falling hammers. Young moved at the last possible second, rolling under the attack. As he came up, something changed in his expression. He had learned enough. Young moved forward for the first time, closing the distance instead of creating it. Grax, surprised by the sudden change, swung wildly. Young ducked under the arm, his hand moving in a blur. 3 quick strikes, so precise they looked like they had been planned for years. The first strike hit a pressure point on Grax's lower spine. The second hit a nerve cluster under his right arm. The third touched a spot just below his skull. Grax froze mid-swing. Then his legs gave out. The massive warrior collapsed to the arena floor with a thunderous crash, his body paralyzed but completely unharmed. His plasma claws deactivated automatically as his muscles stopped responding. The arena fell absolutely silent. Young stood over his fallen opponent, breathing steadily. He bowed again, this time to Grax. "You are very strong," Young said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the arena. "Thank you for the match." Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor, scanning Grax with concern. After a moment, the head medic announced, "He's uninjured. It's a neural disruption. Temporary paralysis. He'll recover fully in approximately 20 minutes. Dex stared at the scene, her usually composed expression showing clear shock. The trial of strength goes to Earth. The crowd erupted, but not with cheers. With questions, confusion, disbelief. Voar stood up, his forearms uncrossing. What had he just witnessed? They walked onto the arena floor and helped Young walk back toward the exit. Reporters and officials swarmed around them, shouting questions. How did he do that? What technology did you use? What kind of weapon was that? Hannah stepped forward, her young face serious. There was no technology. No weapons. What you saw was a martial art developed on Earth over thousands of years. We call it using your opponent's strength against them. But Grax is the strongest fighter in this sector. Exactly, Hannah said. Which is why raw strength was never going to win this match. Young Park spent 20 minutes studying every movement, every pattern, every habit. He learned where Grax was strong, yes, but more importantly, he learned where every body has vulnerabilities. It doesn't matter how strong you are if your nervous system can be interrupted. An alien scientist pushed forward, but the precision required, the knowledge of anatomy. You would need to study Vorheim physiology for years. Young studied the basics yesterday, they said calmly. But all biological beings have similarities, nerves, pressure points, balance. He didn't need to know everything about Vorheim biology. He just needed to understand principles that apply to all living things. Vor finally pushed through the crowd, his massive form towering over the humans. His expression was no longer mocking. You let him attack you for 20 minutes just to learn? Of course, Young said, speaking up for the first time since his brief comment to Grax. My master always taught me, the enemy teaches you how to defeat them. If you are patient enough to listen, and if you have miscalculated, if you had been wrong, Young smiled slightly, then I would have lost. But humans learned a long time ago that raw power alone rarely wins. Every creature in nature is stronger than us, faster than us, better armed than us. We survived by being smarter, by adapting, by turning strength into weakness. The crowd parted as medical teams helped Grax to his feet. The massive warrior was already recovering, his motor functions returning. He looked at Young with new eyes. I have never been defeated, Grax said slowly. You weren't defeated, Young replied. Your body was. There's a difference. You're still the strongest fighter here. I just found a way around that strength. Grax stared at the small human for a long moment. Then, Slowly, he bowed. It was a gesture of respect from a warrior to a warrior. The crowd began to murmur again, but this time, the tone was different. Not mockery, not laughter. Something else. Uncertainty. As the Earth delegation left the arena, Vor remained standing, watching them go. The sneer was completely gone from his face now. Perhaps he had underestimated these humans. Perhaps they all had. The Council's central simulation chamber was a massive spherical room, filled with holographic displays and advanced computing systems. It was here that the greatest minds in the galaxy came to solve impossible problems. Today, it would host the Trial of Wisdom. High Chancellor Dex stood before a gathering of council members and observers. After what had happened in the arena, attendance had tripled. Everyone wanted to see what Earth would do next. The Trial of Wisdom tests more than intelligence, Dex explained to the assembled crowd. It tests judgment, ethics, the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure. She activated the simulation. 3 planets appeared in the holographic display, each orbiting a massive dying star. The star pulsed with unstable energy, growing brighter and more dangerous with each passing moment. This scenario has been used for 200 years, Dex continued. The star will go supernova in 48 hours. Each planet has a population of approximately 5 billion beings. Planet Alpha is inhabited by Crethians. Planet Beta by Zentari. Planet Gamma by Vorhine. The crowd stirred. Each species represented was a major power in the council. Your species has the resources to save only one planet's population before the star explodes, Dex said, looking directly at Day. The other 2 will perish. Choose. It was a test with no right answer, only revealing ones. Most species chose to save their own kind, proving loyalty to their people. Some tried to negotiate alliances, choosing to save a species in exchange for future favors. A few chose based on pure logic, saving whichever population could be evacuated most efficiently, but everyone had to choose. That was the point. Leaders had to make impossible decisions. They stood quietly, looking at the simulation. Hannah stood beside him, along with 2 new arrivals from Earth's delegation. A woman named Ji-Wan Choi, who wore practical work clothes and had grease stains on her hands like she had just come from a workshop. And a younger woman named Sora Nam, who had messy hair and tired eyes like she hadn't slept in days. You have 48 hours in the simulation, Dex said, which translates to 18 hours of real time. Choose wisely. They turned to Ji-Wan and Sora. Can we save them all? The question caused immediate reaction in the crowd. That's not the test. Someone shouted. You have to choose. Councilor Mira, a Zentari elder, stepped forward. Representative Kang, I understand you're new to the council, but the parameters are clear. You cannot save everyone. That is the nature of difficult decisions. I understand the parameters, they said calmly. I'm asking if we can change them. The simulation is locked. These are the conditions. I'm not talking about changing the simulation, they replied. I'm talking about solving the actual problem. Ji-Wan was already studying the holographic star, her fingers moving through the data streams. Sora had pulled out a portable computing device and was running calculations. Fascinating, Sora murmured. The energy signature is unstable, but follows a predictable pattern. Can we work with it? Ji-Wan asked. Maybe. Give me a few hours. Dex frowned. You're wasting time. The simulation is running. Make your choice. But the 2 women weren't listening. They had moved to a side console and were pulling up complex physics equations. Their conversation was rapid and technical, filled with terms most of the observers didn't understand. Commander Vor, watching from the observation deck, leaned toward another officer. What are they doing? I have no idea. Hours passed. Ji-Wan and Sora worked without stopping. occasionally asking Hana to pull up specific data or requesting access to different parts of the simulation's physics engine. Day sat quietly nearby, watching but not interfering. The crowd grew restless. In the simulation, time was passing. The star was growing more unstable. Soon it would be too late to evacuate even one planet. "They're going to fail," someone whispered. "They're not even trying to make a choice. This is foolish. They'll lose the trial." But Vor noticed something. The two human women weren't panicking. They were working with intense focus, checking and rechecking their calculations. Whatever they were doing, they believed in it. 18 hours of real time passed. In the simulation, they were down to the final 6 hours before the supernova. Evacuation ships would need to launch immediately to save even one planet. Jiwan suddenly stood up straight. "I think we have it." Sora nodded, though she looked uncertain. "The margin of error is high." "Really high? How high?" Day asked. 34% chance of complete failure. "And if it works, we save everyone." Day smiled. "Then let's try." Dex stepped forward. "Representative Kong, you're out of time. You must make your choice now, or you forfeit the trial." "We have made our choice," Day said. "We choose to reject your scenario." Shocked silence filled the chamber. "You cannot reject it. You must choose which planet to save." "No," Day said firmly. "We choose to save all three." G1 stepped up to the main control console. "With your permission, Chancellor, I'd like to enter our solution into the simulation." Dex looked at the other council members. Some looked curious. Others looked angry at this break from tradition. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. Enter your solution. The simulation will determine if it's viable." Jiwan's fingers flew across the controls. The holographic display shifted and changed. Complex mathematical models appeared, showing energy flows and spatial calculations that made even the Council's top scientists lean forward with interest. "What we're proposing," Sora explained to the watching crowd, "is to use the star's own energy against itself. The supernova is going to release massive amounts of energy in all directions. We can't stop that, but we can redirect it," Jiwon continued. "By placing specially calibrated satellites at specific points around the star, we can channel that energy into creating temporary wormholes. 3 of them, to be exact." The simulation began to process their solution. Energy patterns flowed through the holographic star, following the paths the humans had calculated. Each wormhole would be stable for approximately 6 hours, Sora said. "Long enough to evacuate one planet's population through each one. The wormholes would connect to nearby safe systems," Jiwan added. "We've already identified 3 suitable destinations within range." Counselor Mira stepped closer, studying the simulation with growing alarm. "But the energy requirements are enormous, and the precision needed. If you're off by even a fraction of a degree, the wormholes could collapse. They could collapse while people are inside them." "Yes," they said quietly. "That's the 34% failure rate. You would risk billions of lives on a 66% chance of success?" Myra's voice rose with emotion. "That's not wisdom. That's recklessness." The simulation continued to run. The satellites deployed. The star's energy was redirected. 3 wormholes began to form, shimmering and unstable, but growing stronger. The crowd watched in absolute silence as evacuation ships from all 3 planets began to fly toward the wormholes. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and the wormholes wouldn't be stable enough. Too late, and the star would explode. In the simulation, the first ships entered the wormholes. Then more. Then thousands. The star reached critical mass. The wormholes held. All 3 planets evacuated completely, their populations emerging safely in the neighboring systems. Moments later, the star exploded in a brilliant flash, destroying everything left behind but claiming no lives. The simulation declared the solution successful. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some council members were shouting in anger. Others were arguing excitedly. Scientists were already pulling up the calculations, trying to understand how the humans had done it. Nex raised her hand for silence. It took several minutes before the crowd settled enough for her to speak. "The simulation has accepted your solution as viable," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "However, Councillor Myra raises a valid concern. The risk of catastrophic failure was extremely high. You gambled billions of lives. What gives you the right to make that choice?" They met her eyes. "With respect, Chancellor, your scenario already gambled billions of lives. You were asking us to choose which 10 billion people would die. We simply rejected the premise of your gamble and offered a different one." "But the risk. Every major achievement in human history came with risk," they interrupted. "When we first tried to fly, we risked falling. When we first went to space, we risked burning up in our atmosphere. When we first contacted other species, we risked war or extinction. Risk is not the absence of wisdom. Sometimes risk is the only wise choice." Sora stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. "Every human alive today is descended from someone who looked at impossible odds and said yes anyway. Our sun will die someday. Our planet will freeze. The universe itself will eventually end. We are, by any measure, already doomed. And yet we get up every morning and try to build something better." "We don't accept your trolley problem," Jiwan added. "When you ask us to choose who dies, we look for a way to break the tracks instead." Vor stood in the observation deck, his forearms hanging at his sides. He thought about the trial of strength, where humans had turned power into weakness. Now, they had turned an impossible choice into a solvable problem. What kind of species thought this way? Dex looked at the other council members. Some were still arguing, but others were nodding slowly, beginning to understand. The breaking room sat in the deepest level of the council station, far from the public galleries and observation decks. Few people ever came here. Even fewer wanted to dot it. It was a small chamber, barely large enough for one person to sit comfortably. The walls were lined with neural technology that could interface directly with the mind, creating experiences that felt completely real. It was the most advanced psychological testing device in the known galaxy. And it was designed to break people. High Chancellor Dex stood outside the chamber with a group of council members and medical staff. Her expression was grave. "The trial of will is not like the others. There is no strategy, no cleverness that can help you. The chamber will attack your mind directly, showing you your worst fears, your greatest failures, your deepest sorrows." They stood before the chamber door, looking calm. Hannah stood beside him, her face tight with worry. "The record is 18 hours, Dex continued, set by a Zentari mystic who spent 40 years training her mind for this exact test. Most candidates last 3 to 5 hours before their psychological defenses collapse completely. What happens when someone breaks?" They asked. "The medical team pulls them out immediately. They usually recover within a few weeks, though some need months of therapy. We've had 3 candidates who never fully recovered. They live in care facilities now, their minds too damaged to function normally." Commander Vor stood in the back of the group. After watching the first 2 trials, he had begun to respect these humans. But this trial was different. This wasn't about clever fighting techniques or creative problem solving. This was pure mental endurance against an enemy that knew every weakness a mind could have. "You don't have to do this yourself," Vor said quietly. "You could send someone else from your delegation." "No," they said. "I'm Earth's representative. This is my responsibility." Hannah grabbed his arm. Please reconsider. Young and Jiwon and Sora all volunteered. Any of them could. I know, they said gently. But this is something I need to do. Dex gestured toward the chamber. Whenever you're ready. They took a deep breath and stepped inside. The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. Inside, there was only a single chair in the center of the room and a neural interface headset hanging from the ceiling. Outside, medical technicians activated their monitoring systems. Screens lit up, showing Day's vital signs, brain activity, and stress levels. Neural interface connecting, one technician reported. Day sat in the chair and placed the headset on his head. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chamber activated. On the monitors, Day's stress levels immediately spiked. His heart rate doubled. His brain showed patterns consistent with intense fear and anxiety. What's he seeing? Vor asked. We can't see his specific visions, a technician explained. The chamber creates unique experiences based on each individual's psyche. But based on his neural patterns, he's experiencing something terrible. Inside the chamber, Day's face remained calm, but sweat had begun to form on his forehead. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair tightly. Hours passed slowly. The medical staff watched their screens with growing concern. Day's stress levels remained dangerously high, but he didn't break. His brain activity showed he was fully conscious and aware, experiencing everything the chamber threw at him. 3 hours, a technician announced. He's matching the average, another said. But his stress levels are higher than normal. The chamber is hitting him hard. More hours crawled by. Day's breathing had become heavier. His face was pale, but he remained seated, enduring. 6 hours, 9 hours. Counselor Mira arrived in the observation room, looking worried. How is he doing? Still conscious, Dex replied. But I don't know how much longer he can last. His neural patterns show he's experiencing massive psychological trauma. Then pull him out. Not until he yields or loses consciousness. Those are the rules. Young Park had arrived as well, standing with his arms crossed. He said nothing, but his expression was tense. He had faced Grax in physical combat and won. But watching Day fight an invisible enemy was somehow worse. 12 hours, the technician called out. Vor leaned forward. He's past the average. He could yield now with honor, but Day didn't yield. 15 hours. The medical staff was getting nervous now. They had emergency protocols ready. If Day's brain showed signs of permanent damage, they would forcibly shut down the chamber, rules or not. 18 hours. The room fell silent. Day had just matched the record set by the Zentari mystic. Everyone expected him to yield now. He had proven himself equal to the best. But Day's voice came through the chamber's speaker system, weak but clear. I haven't finished. What? Dex moved closer to the monitors. What does he mean? The hours continued to pass. 20, 25, 30. This is impossible, a technician whispered. No one has ever endured this long. The chamber is at maximum intensity. His mind should have shattered by now. Counselor Myra paced back and forth. We need to stop this. We're going to kill him. Look at his brain patterns, another technician said, pointing at a screen. He's not unconscious. He's not dissociating. He's fully present and aware. He's experiencing everything. And he's still holding on. 40 hours, 50, 60. The observation room had filled with people. News had spread throughout the station that something unprecedented was happening. Council members, scientists, officers, and civilians crowded in to watch the monitors. G1 and Sora had arrived, standing with Hana and Young. None of them spoke. They just watched the screens showing Day's vital signs, praying he would survive. 72 hours, the technician announced, his voice full of disbelief. Commander Vor had been standing for 3 days straight, refusing to leave. What is he made of? 90 hours passed. Then 90-5. At 96 hours, Day finally moved. He reached up slowly and removed the neural interface headset. The chamber powered down. The medical staff rushed to open the door. Day stood up, stumbling slightly. He was exhausted, his face gaunt and his eyes red. But he was walking. He was conscious. Hana ran to him, supporting him with her shoulder. Young moved to his other side. How? Vex demanded, her composure completely gone. Your neural patterns showed you experienced every horror we inflicted on you. You should be catatonic. You should be broken. Day's voice was hoarse, but he managed to speak. You showed me nightmares of humanity's end. Earth burning. Everyone I care about dying. Civilization collapsing. You showed me my failures, my mistakes, every terrible thing I've ever done or that could happen. Then how are you standing? Because every human grows up knowing we're going to end someday. Day said quietly, our sun will die. Our world will freeze. The universe itself will eventually run down and go dark. We are, by any cosmic measure, already doomed. He looked at the assembled council members with tired eyes. And yet, we get up every morning anyway. We build. We create. We love. We try. You showed me the end of everything I care about. And yes, it hurt. It hurt more than you can imagine. But it's not new information. It's the background radiation of being human. We carry the weight of our own extinction every single day, and we keep going anyway. Sora stepped forward, her own eyes wet. You can't break what's already learned to carry the weight of its own mortality. Vor stared at Day, understanding finally dawning. You're all like this? Your entire species? More or less, Young said quietly. Some handle it better than others. But yes, we all live with the knowledge that nothing lasts forever. It makes us sad sometimes, but it also makes us brave. The medical staff were checking Day's vital signs, shocked to find him relatively stable despite the ordeal. Vex stood silently for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice different than before, softer, with something that might have been respect. The trial of will is concluded. Earth has passed. The crowd began to murmur. Some looked disturbed. Others looked amazed. All of them looked at the humans differently than they had before. Day allowed Hannah and Young to help him toward the medical bay for observation. As they walked past Vor, the massive Krethian warrior bowed deeply. I mocked you when you first arrived, Vor said. I called you weak. I see now that I understood nothing about strength. Day managed a small smile. We don't blame you, Commander. We must seem strange to those who haven't walked our path. As the Earth delegation disappeared down the corridor, the council members remained in the observation room. Talking in hushed voices, they had witnessed something they didn't fully understand. A species that carried despair like armor and turned existential dread into motivation. The final trial was complete. Now came the hardest part of all. The decision. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room on the station. Its domed ceiling showed a perfect view of the stars beyond, reminding all who entered that their decisions affected countless worlds across that vast darkness. Today, every seat was filled. Representatives from 1,000 species sat in curved rows that rose up around the central floor. Some had traveled from distant corners of the galaxy after hearing about Earth's trials. The mood was tense, uncertain. What had seemed like a simple formality days ago had become something far more complicated. High Chancellor Vex stood at the center podium, her crystalline form catching the light from above. Around her sat the senior council members, those whose votes would decide Earth's fate. Dekang stood in the designated space for petitioners. He had rested for a full day after the trial of will, but still looked tired. Hannah, Young, Jiwon, and Sora stood behind him in a show of support. They wore simple clothing, as always, looking almost plain compared to the elaborate robes and advanced garments worn by representatives from other worlds. "The trials are complete," Nex announced, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Earth has passed all 3 tests. Normally, this would lead directly to acceptance. However, this council has concerns that must be addressed before we vote." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. An ancient being named Hierarchel rose from his seat. He was old beyond measure, his species having been part of the council since its founding thousands of years ago. When he spoke, everyone listened. "I have studied the results of Earth's trials carefully," Kel said, his voice thin but strong. "What I have witnessed disturbs me greatly." They remained calm, but Hannah tensed beside him. "In the trial of strength, humanity demonstrated the ability to defeat superior power through unconventional means," Kel continued. "In the trial of wisdom, they rejected established parameters and created new solutions where none should exist. In the trial of will, they endured what should have destroyed them by carrying their own extinction as motivation." He paused, letting his words settle across the chamber. "These are not the actions of a stable species. These are the actions of a species that refuses to accept limits, that sees rules as suggestions, that carries existential despair as fuel for their ambitions." Kel's eyes fixed on Day. "I believe humanity is too dangerous to join this council." The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates agreed loudly. Others shouted in protest. Dex raised her hand for silence, and gradually the crowd settled. "Hierarchel raises concerns we must consider," Dex said. "A species that rejects limitations, that thrives on impossible odds, that refuses to accept defeat. Such a species could upset the balance we have maintained for millennia." Commander Vor stood suddenly in the officers' section. "With respect, Chancellor, I must speak." Dex looked surprised but nodded. "The floor recognizes Commander Vor." Vor descended to the main floor, his massive form drawing every eye. He had been one of the first to mock humanity's arrival. Now he stood before the council with a different message. "I was wrong about Earth," Vor said simply. "When I first saw their envoy, I laughed. When I saw their champion, I called them weak. I thought they were fools who didn't understand what they were facing." He turned to face Day directly, but I was the fool. "Everything Hierarchel said is true. Humans do reject limitations. They do create solutions where none should exist. They do carry darkness as motivation. And the galaxy desperately needs exactly that." Surprised murmurs filled the chamber. "We have grown comfortable," Vor continued, addressing the entire council now. "We follow established rules. We work within known parameters. We accept that some problems have no solutions. And because of that, we have stopped growing. We have stopped adapting. We have stopped truly trying." He gestured toward the human delegation. "These people showed us something we had forgotten. That raw power is meaningless without wisdom. That impossible just means no one has succeeded yet. That despair can become strength if you refuse to let it paralyze you. We don't need to fear their differences. We need to learn from them." Councilor Myra stood as well. "Commander Vor speaks with passion, but passion is not wisdom. Yes, Earth passed the trials, but they did so in ways that violated the spirit of each test. They didn't choose who to save. They gambled billions of lives on an uncertain solution. Is that truly wisdom?" Before Vor could respond, Day stepped forward. "May I address the council?" Dex hesitated, then nodded. "Speak." Day walked to the center of the floor, looking small and tired amid the grandeur of the chamber. But when he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "Councilor Myra is right," he began. "We did violate the spirit of your tests. We rejected your framework. We gambled when you expected calculation. We endured what should have broken us." He looked around at the assembled delegates. "But that's because we come from a different place than you do. Most of your species achieve space travel after thousands of years of stable development. You built your civilization slowly, carefully, with time to perfect your methods. You learned to work within systems because your systems worked." Day's expression grew more serious. "Humanity doesn't have that luxury. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times before we reached the stars. War, disease, environmental collapse. We survived not because we were wise, but because we refused to give up, even when giving up was the logical choice. We're not better than you. We're just desperate in a way you've forgotten how to be." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You're right to fear us. We are dangerous. We do reject limits. We do carry our extinction like fuel. But the galaxy is facing new threats every day. The Void incursion proved that. Your established methods, your careful systems, your logical choices, they failed. 3 sectors burned." Day's voice softened slightly. "Maybe you need representatives who've built their entire civilization on the principle that impossible just means harder. Maybe you need someone at the table who will look at your unsolvable problems and say, 'Yes, but we have to try anyway.' Not because we're smarter, not because we're stronger, but because we've never learned how to accept defeat gracefully." The chamber fell silent. Delegates looked at each other, uncertainty plain on their faces. Hierarch Kel stood again. "You speak well, Representative Kang, but you have not addressed my core concern. How can we trust a species that refuses to accept limits? What happens when your refusal to accept defeat leads you to decisions that endanger us all?" Day met the ancient being's gaze. "The same thing that happens when your careful systems fail to save those who need saving. The same thing that happens when your logical choices leave someone behind. We'll make mistakes. Terrible ones, probably. But we'll also try things you've given up on. We'll look for solutions in places you've stopped searching. We'll carry hope to situations you've written off as lost causes." He turned to address the full council. "We're not asking to lead you. We're asking to stand beside you. To be your partners, not your saviors. To offer a different perspective when yours reaches its limits. You have wisdom we're still learning. Experience we desperately need. But we have something too. A stubbornness that looks at the heat death of the universe and says, 'Yes, but not today.'" Day's voice grew stronger. "Vote us down if you must. We'll understand. We know we're strange. We know we're dangerous. But we also know the galaxy is heading toward challenges that will require every tool, every perspective, every kind of strength available. And we want to help." He stepped back, finished. Dex looked at the other senior council members. They spoke quietly among themselves for several minutes while the chamber waited in tense silence. Finally, Dex spoke. "The council will now vote. All in favor of accepting Earth as a full member?" The voting system activated. Lights appeared across the chamber, some green for yes, some red for no. The votes came in slowly, each delegate making their choice visible to all. Green, red, green, green, red, red, green. The counting seemed to take forever. Hannah gripped Sora's hand tightly. Young stood like a statue, barely breathing. Jiwan closed her eyes. The final vote appeared on the main display. It was almost perfectly split. Exactly half the council had voted yes. Exactly half had voted no. Except for one vote. One final undecided light. Everyone turned to look at Hierarch Kel. The ancient being sat quietly, his expression unreadable. The entire future of Earth's relationship with the galaxy hung on his decision. Slowly, deliberately, Kel raised his hand. His light turned green. The chamber exploded with noise. Some delegates cheered. Others protested. But it was done. By a single vote, Earth had been accepted into the Galactic Council. Vex had to call for order 3 times before the noise died down enough for her to speak. The vote is concluded. Earth is hereby accepted as a provisional member of the Galactic Council, subject to review in 10 standard years. Day bowed deeply. Thank you, Chancellor. We will prove worthy of this trust. As the session ended and delegates began to file out, many stopped to speak with the human delegation. Some offered congratulations. Others offered warnings. All of them looked at the 5 humans with new eyes. Commander Vor pushed through the crowd and approached. Day. The massive warrior extended one of his 4 hands. Welcome to the council, Representative Kang, he said formally.